I'm Heather Flournoy. Is it time to start this? Is it 1 o'clock? Is it 1 o'clock?
It's 1 o'clock.
Okay. Hey, so we're live and I'm out in the field at Beaver Dam Sanctuary here in Bedford. And Katonah Village Library has sponsored this foraging walk, educational foraging walk. And there's a whole camera team here that you can't see behind the camera. Mike Dwyer over on listening in to your questions, Steve Filler, and up in Oswego County, New York, my mother, Heather Flournoy, is admitting participants and recording this for us. So we've got a whole team it takes to set this all up. Mike Dwyer arranged for the beautiful weather today. So if you have questions, I think you can ask them if you're not on mute. And you can also put them in the chat. Somebody's looking at the chat. So the whole point of this series, this is going to be a series, is to just get people out in nature, looking at getting to be more familiar with the plants around them and nature around them and appreciating it. And to begin to, from a resiliency standpoint, my goal is that people start to understand what foods there are just available in wild medicinals. In order to start that, I want to tell you about some resources and also mention that there's always poisonous plants, poisonous mushrooms, poisonous things. And one thing that I like to do is to help people identify poisonous plants so that they don't confuse them with edible plants. And as you learn, plants will become very apparent. They won't look anything alike. But when you're new to it, as my partner Steve says sometimes when I'll point at a patch of plants like this right here and say, what do you see? He says green. Sorry, Steve. And but he's slowly getting to know the differences in different kinds of plants. So we use all of our senses when we're looking at plants. Sometimes we smell a plant, break it and smell it. Sometimes we look at the shape, the color. Sometimes some people recommend taking a little tiny nibble and spitting it out. Are there any questions? Or is there somebody? No? Okay. And then we get to know things like the weather. And it's important to learn to identify trees and different areas, like the words of different types of landscape and little microclimates, because that can make a difference in identifying a plant or finding a plant when you're going out foraging. And then one more safety thing. So my idea is that as we go forward and do these short Zoom foraging interactions, is that you can be in the field. In between, you can send photos, or we can have live Zooms where you're sharing photos. We're not quite there for the photo sharing yet. But there is somebody that can see your screen right now. If you in the future, you'll be able to share your screen, your video stream. But we're going to look at what is out right now. So for today, we're going to talk about what you can go out and easily find in the woods. My magic basket. In this, I carry a few things. I don't really enjoy using chemicals, but I am very adverse to the idea of getting ticks. So I wear white pants, not for fashion, but because that if a tick were to crawl up my leg, you'd be able to see that little tiny tick, hopefully. I wear white socks that we found. These are a very heavy white cotton sock that comes way up the leg. So I wear those over my pants. I wear tall boots. And then I use something like this, a dry, deep repellent, and I spray it on my clothing and shoes. Now, as I go up my body, I have a white shirt on underneath that's tucked into the pants. A lot of times I'll wear a white long sleeve shirt with a rubber band around the wrist, depending on where I'm foraging. Today, we're going to stay pretty low risk areas. I also carry a hat these Tilly Air hats are really good for foraging. You can spray the hat, the whole rim, and that if you were to walk under a low tree, ticks actually wait at the ends of bushes, shrubs, blades of grass, weeds, and trees, low-hanging parts of trees where they can jump onto the deer. So I spray the hat. And then this also helps depending on what time you're out. We just had a great rain here the past few days, and tonight towards dusk, the black flies and other little gnats will probably be out and biting ferociously. So it's really good to have a hat and it's sprayed to repel those. I carry water with me and my phone with me. I have gotten lost, so it's really good to have GPS even in the local woods. I used to carry these, I don't anymore, but I have a little tree finder book, really little, so it's easy to carry in the back pocket. Really important to learn trees if you're going to learn about mushrooms, especially because a lot of mushrooms grow on trees and you can identify between different species depending on the tree. This I found to be a good book to have, to learn, a beginner's book. I used to carry this a lot. This opens up, it's plastic, and it was just really good when I couldn't quite remember how to differentiate between, say, balsam fir and black spruce, or just different. It even has the shape of the tree, so that's really important in the winter when you're looking for different trees. So those are useful, those kind of guides. This is one of my all-time favorites. This is like bathroom reading for me, a lot of fun. Peterson's guides. This is the medicinal plants and herbs. There's also one for edible plants. And then there's a wildflower guide, also really useful. They're all great. Pretty heavy, dense little books. Not so great for carrying, but I keep them in the car and I'll just go right back to the car and look up a plant. And eventually it takes, because it's kind of hard when you've got, 50,000 different plant species and you're trying to learn the ones that are growing here right now, and they change constantly, and figure out what ones do grow here. So let's start taking a look.
A quick question.
Do we have any questions? Do we have people?
Yes, we have a question.
Okay.
One question.
question?
This is Effie. I missed
You can go
the
past
first,
us.
I missed the
Or
first
listen.
2 minutes. Where are you right
What's
now?
the question?
Effie wants to know where we are. He missed the first.
Oh, we're at Beaver Dam in Bedford. Are we in Bedford Hills or Bedford, town of Bedford, off of Harris Road? And this is a public walking place, and it goes down to a river where we're going to walk down quickly. It's a lovely place. And just up the road, there's a great dog park area. So
Great,
I want to start walking, but it's so hard to start moving when there's a whole bunch of plants right here that we could look at. But I know there's even better ones down the way a little bit. So let's go down and start in. And by the way, just looking out in the field here, I don't know if you can see this field, but I see yellow of dandelions, which tells me that all over. So first of all, it's important to know different plants are edible when they're at different stages of life. The dandelions were awesome and completely usable, every part of the plant, up until last week, just before they bloomed. Right now, it's all usable, but slightly differently. Let's take a quick look. Let's look down here. I'm getting on that. So the dandelion, most of these that you see right now came up from last year. And here, oh, this is still perfect edible. So if you can get a knife and dig around this and pull this up, which today would be great because it rained yesterday. The soil is really, really soft. And see all these little dandelion buds. So you want to dig underneath. You don't have to get the whole root unless you want to get the root. And you'll be able to use this. Plus the flower is edible. So a nice thing you can do is decorate a salad with those little soft, sweet ends, but this whole part is edible. Just make sure you're picking somewhere where there's not contamination. We don't want, try not to pick where it's likely that dogs are peeing. Wash everything you pick, or people, or contamination like road salt or other chemicals. Don't pick from a contaminated waste site or where somebody's spraying pesticides. So the leaves of this dandelion plant are edible, and they're very deeply toothed. You see they have a, and right now in the spring, they're still quite tender. In another, as soon as these start to turn, these dandelions, they're already getting a little bit tougher and a little bit more bitter as soon as they bloom. The energy of the plant's going into the flower. And then in another couple weeks, they'll be more bitter. But still right now, they're good for sauteing, adding to salads, different things you can do with them. I read a great recipe this week where somebody makes pakoras out of the whole, from the crown up, with chickpea flour. All right, let's keep walking. Any questions? If anybody has questions while I'm walking, we're going to be another minute till we get to the next spot. It's so beautiful out here. The sunshine's so welcome if anybody's joining from another area. It's been really cold and rainy here lately.
Heather, how early in the year does the foraging season start?
I start foraging, looking for things in early March. And I actually forage through most of the winter, because before that, if we have a little warm up in February, January, February, usually do, we'll often see some mushrooms on trees, winter oyster mushrooms in our area. That's one of the only things that's out in the worst part of winter. So I'm an avid mushroom enthusiast as well. All right, we got a couple more things here. Well, actually, we have so many things right here. My heart starts to race a little bit.
Heather,
All right.
I know.
Oh, let's get this shot. There's a bunch of people on horseback. Just a nice thing to see in Bedford.
I can hear you, Carol. Go ahead.
So we have some plants that I just spotted as we were walking, and field greens right now. So I'm right off the trail. So and the grass is still quite low. I try not to forage where I'm going to be in a deeper grass because of ticks, but otherwise it's great to forage in fields. So this is dock. It's a spring green. A lot of people think of dock and the root of it as a medicinal plant. Important to know because there's a whole family in the dock family. There's yellow dock, curly dock. There's all different docks.
How do you
some of them have a
spell?
little bit longer, pointier.
How do you spell that, Heather?
leaf. What?
Dock? How do you spell dock?
D-O-C-K. You can look
You
those
should
up.
repeat the question, too.
Okay.
And these leaves are edible in the spring. You can add them into sauteed foods. And then there's other more advanced medicinal uses for dock. It's an important one to notice. And then this plant is everywhere in the world. It's so cool. This is plantain, not like the banana type plantains we have, but a plantain. You can see the lines in it. There's two kinds of common plantain. One is very round-leafed, and this one is the narrow-leafed plantain. They are medicinal, and they're used as a thickener for soups, stews. So it's great. They can be used in gumbo. They can be used in all kinds of things as a demulcent internally for helping the intestines. I have some funny stories about that at some point, but this is one of the cool plants that is very, very old and is native all around the world, which I think is so cool. It grows in all kinds of conditions, a really resilient plant, and it's probably in your front yard and you probably were pulling it out like it was a weed. It can be used in the spring as a green. It can be used medicinally, and it's a good thing to look up on how to make it into a tonic to take. And you can see the plant here. It's very small. It does get bigger, and at some point it has a little single stem that comes up with a little flower on it that's very, doesn't get a lot of notice. All right, so we got those two, and then over here I'm seeing something that really gets me excited. And I can't believe it, but I forgot my gloves. So, oh no, here they are. So this is, anyone have a guess what this is and why I'm excited?
Nettles?
Yeah, Mike got it. It's nettles. And actually there's 3 edible plants, right, 5 edible plants right here. Okay, so nettles are great in the spring. They're not going to be great once they start to get a bloom, which is pale green. It's not a showy bloom, so it's hard to see. But and only really, you know, right now they're great to eat. They grow in old farmyards a lot, or near old farms, and disturbed areas. You can see there's like not much grass right here. They're very prickly, which is why I put gloves on, and they are very sharp toothed, but not as deep of a tooth as a dandelion. And they look hairy underneath. This is stinging nettle, by the way, which is why I am not touching it with my bare hands, because it'll give you a rash all over your hands from the nettles, not from a toxin. If you drop this into hot water, the nettles disappear. If you dry these, the nettles, the stinging part disappears. They're great as what's called a pot herb, meaning you can cook it. It absorbs a lot of minerals from the soil, so it's used as a tonic in the spring to get in a lot of minerals. There's some people who take it and soak it in apple cider vinegar, and the minerals transfer into the vinegar. I can't remember when you do that if you're supposed to dry it first or just do it fresh, so it's something to look up. But nettles are quite exciting spring green for medicinal and edible purposes. So some people think of them as a sort of a noxious weed because they sting, and then foragers get quite excited about them.
Heather, try to position your microphone so it's not rubbing against your skin. Getting a little.
Where is my microphone?
It's on the inside collar.
Oh, should be on the outside one?
Or both.
Both? Okay.
Maybe that stabilizes it.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Very well.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm bending down and moving around. This is an invasive plant called lesser celandine. Quite lovely to look at. The leaf is somewhat similarly shaped to the violet, but it's a little more open and it's very, very tender. It just comes apart when you rub it a little, and it's almost like a succulent. This, once you learn to identify it, you'll start seeing it everywhere in our area. It's taking over whole swaths of areas. It's a really interesting way that it reproduces. It can be used as a pot herb. It is edible if you cook it right until when it flowers. Once it flowers, it's best not to eat it. There's a higher amount of a little bit of a toxin similar. It's not oxalic acid like spinach has. It'll actually sting in your mouth if you eat it raw, or it can for some people. Once you cook it, that takes it away, or dry it. Lesser celandine. We were going to go in the woods, but this is still so exciting. Like, we're just walking past this cool stuff. Look down here. This purple-green flower, or a plant. This is wild, has a bunch of different names. There's some species of it that are native here, like Oswego tea. I call this wild oregano because it tastes in the spring like oregano, smells like oregano. Just crush it and smell it. It's absolutely amazing. But it's also a really important plant for pollinators. It gets a great flower. Some bee balm, right? Bee balm is or wild bergamot.
It's a bit hard to see with your gloves on.
Oh.
And if you could show them against your pants, it'll be really easy to see.
Okay. I was just told that it's hard to see because I had my gloves on still. There, you can look against my... So it's a little bit purple and green. Just delicious. You can make tea with it. You can just break it up and use it like you would a fresh thyme or a fresh oregano. Yum. So many plants here. Does anybody have questions? We're just going to walk. If we have a few more minutes, how are we all doing on battery life?
It's
We're going to
1:25.
take a look down into another little ecosystem near the river. And it's really fun to look there. There's some interesting plants in the spring. Oh, by the way, when I go foraging, this is one of the best investments I've ever made. I should make commercials for the company. These are muck boots, and I wear them year-round, winter, spring, not in August. They're a little too hot, but I can walk through creeks, and they're waterproof. I can walk through snow and ice. They've got a good grip on the bottom, and they help protect a little bit if I was going to walk right here and I have them sprayed a little bit from ticks. They go over my pants. It's really sorry about that. Chewing and walking at the same time. Chewing, walking, and talking at the same time. Oh, wow. Okay. So if anybody was talked to me lately or sees the Instagram at Wild Nearby, I get really excited when I see these. I found something out about this plant recently. I've been picking it and eating it for years, and I never knew why. Sometimes the leaves were really big, sometimes they were all tiny. And every once in a while I see some flowers. This year I'm seeing tons of flowers on them. And I just found out that this plant has a 7-year cycle. It only flowers once every 7 years. And the leaves get bigger as it goes, and it gets more leaves. But we can see a mature plant here. These are Trout Lily. They're so cool. They're also quite delicious, the flower and the plant. The leaves are very tender. They're not worth cooking because they just turn gray and get soggy like spinach very quickly, hardly just touching something hot. They're very, very tender. They're quite delicious as a little trailside snack and to throw into salads. Because it's only once every 7 years, unless there were hundreds of these somewhere, I wouldn't pick the flowers. But I have actually found some patches this year where there was like 500 flowers, and I did pick a few. I try to forage responsibly. Part of foraging for me is the joy of finding things and the flavors of finding things. And then, but when I find an invasive plant that's edible, I'll eat all of that I can find, because people tend not to want it. All right. Many of you have seen all of these plants right here. Now we're walking into the woodlands. Can you see down the trail? The trail's lined with these larger green plants here, and we're down by the river. And we have some, I love to talk about things that look similar to each other, where one is poisonous and the other is not. In this case, they're both poisonous. So you can avoid the ones that look like this. But they're very cool plants. This in the spring it's called skunk cabbage, and it really stinks. In the earlier spring, like this year, I think it was in February already that I was seeing these coming up all through the rivers and vernal ponds, the places that are only wet during part of the year. And they come up and they're purple, and they have this very cool flower. The purple part is a flower. Maybe we can find some that has a flower inside it still down by the river. It's so interesting how the second-year plant comes up, and skunk cabbage is quite sort of leathery and a little bit shiny. Again, it's purple. There's lots of pictures if you look it up on my Instagram feed at Wild Nearby, and also just Google it. And they have a strong smell. The coolest thing I found out about skunk cabbage is it creates its own heat. So you'll see it in the springtime with where the ice is melted around it. I mean, not even at spring. When we're starting to think about spring in February, early March around here, and those are melted around it and coming up, and you're like, wow, I can't believe anything's coming through the snow and ice already. It's so cold and miserable out. They are such a cool plant. and yeah, they create heat. I just can't get over that. This looks very similar, grows in the exact same habitat, is not very leathery, it's quite tender, is very close in color, but it does have lines in it, deep lines and grooves, like you can fold it up like an accordion. This is called false hellebore. Every part of the plant is toxic to humans. Apparently it's like a really important native plant for the pollinators. So native plant people get quite excited when they see the false hellebore. Don't eat any part of it. And by the way, the skunk cabbage, don't eat any part of it. In the old foraging books, the early ones, Yule Gibbons, I always forget the name of it.
Stalking the wild asparagus.
Stalking the wild asparagus. It said, I think in that one, that you can eat that if you boil it, throw away the water, boil it again, throw away the water, and then like saute it. So I did that with my grandmother one year, and she told me that her neighbors used to make it for them. So we brought in a bunch. I mean, it looks bountiful and beautiful. We lived upstate New York, and we brought in a bunch of that. We did 3 changes of water. All the time, my grandma's saying, "Oh, you're throwing away all the good vitamins we need in the spring." Dropped it in, boiled it. The water turned a color, threw it out several times. Then we ate it. My grandma first. This is about 25 years ago. She started crying and went over and was putting water in her mouth. Just teary front. And I said, "Oh, Graham, can't be that bad." So I eat some. I don't feel anything. I'm like, "I'm fine." And it started going down. It felt like my tongue was 6 inches thick and that it was burning with an acid deep into my tongue. I really don't recommend eating skunk cabbage. So many foragers I meet tell me that it's edible. Like, okay, I'll tell you where my patch is. Any questions? Yes. And then we'll wrap this up soon because I think our batteries are getting low. But there is something hidden in here that is usually this is a very secret type of plant to reveal. And I hope nobody comes and decimates them. There's something called responsible harvesting and foraging. But this is quite the delicacy. And over there is some. Again, look at that. Look at it compared to this. It's right near the skunk cabbage, right near the.
You gotta show which one you're talking about.
This little beauty right in here. This is. Let's just smell it. That's the first thing for IDing this. It's very tender, very soft. Smells wonderful, like garlic. This is wild leeks. So this is a very small patch, although there are some babies here. We want this to spread every year. So when I pick it, I'll just pick, you see this, just get 1 leaf. The plant can still survive then. Throw it in there. Some people say that if you cut above the crown, like leave an inch, you can take both of them and that bulb will still be viable the next year. I think it loses out some of its ability to spread. So if we want this patch to get bigger and bigger, I'm seeing thousands and thousands of these everywhere in the woods around northern Westchester this year. Usually I see remnants because foragers, I think professional foragers who were serving restaurants in the past are not out this year. And so we get to share in the bounty. Could be other reasons. Could be just a good year. Things change. Some years you get a lot of apples. Some years you don't. Same thing with plants. So delicious. Ramp pesto you can make. I had so many this year.
You eat the leaf.
You can eat the leaf. I want to smell like I've eaten raw leeks for a couple days now.
How do you tell the difference?
But luckily we're social distancing. What? Question.
How do you tell the difference between that plant and the poisonous plant you just mentioned?
I'll just eat this
How do you
whole
tell
one.
the difference between that plant and the poisonous skunk?
And that's a good question.
Repeat the question. Repeat it. Repeat it.
Oh,
You
so
mentioned
somebody
a
wants to know how we can tell the difference between these plants right here. So we've got the false hellebore. It's got an accordion-like leaf. Very, very, like the way it moves, the way it grows. You can see it has many leaves coming up through the center, many layers of these leaves coming up. Whereas this, the skunk cabbage, they're mostly coming from down here. This one, they're coming, I don't know if you can see this stem. I'm not going to pick the false hellebore, but as the stem comes up, the leaves are coming out of the stem in every inch. Whereas the skunk cabbage, these lower leaves all coming out of the same place, inside tightly furrowed. Now the skunk cabbage will keep going. It'll get a couple feet across. It'll get really big leaves. Skunk cabbage, you can just break a piece. Stinks like skunk. False hellebore does not stink. But look at the false hellebore when it's young compared to this.
Looks like a rat.
It looks like the ramp, but when you break it and smell it, no smell of garlic. And if you dug it up, it doesn't have a bulb like a garlic. And you can't really tell by photo, but this is soft and tender. This is, well, it's also very soft, but it's pleated. This is not pleated like that. And there's no smell. There's another lookalike to ramps, which is wild, it's a type of lily. I can't think what it's called, lily of the valley. Looks almost identical, young lily of the valley. Looks almost identical to young ramps. No smell of garlic. And no, it doesn't have a bulb like the garlic. Lily, that kind of lily is toxic. You shouldn't eat it. This tastes like onion, tastes like garlic. A lot of foragers taste everything, even slightly toxic stuff. Some plants, their toxicity is based on the amount that you get. The skunk cabbage, if you ate it, it's going to burn. You're never going to taste it again. It's horrible. False hellebore, don't taste it at all. Just don't. I don't know enough about false hellebore. I've heard that it's highly toxic. So, yeah, and these really thin ones growing right here are just a wild onion. Not just a wild onion. So sometimes foraging gets a little challenging on how to clean stuff. You know, it's not coming from the store. It has to be cleaned in a different way. And these wild chives, when you pull them up, again, I don't have my knife with me if anybody has a knife. There's lots. You're going to have, like, for every one of these, there's going to be a little bulb down there. So you get all these little bulbs. You pull them up, and they're really full of dirt. And the little roots are full of dirt. I stick them in a jar of water overnight, the base, and then it's really easy to wash the dirt and debris off the next day. The other plants I try not to pick when they're really dirty. Sort of the lazy forager's way to. Right now, we've had enough rain and then settling overnight that these are nice and clean, and there were leaves here. But I was in a place yesterday, it was a little rainy, and these were all splattered with mud because they were growing in a muddy area. There was no leaves to block the splashing up of the mud. So it would have taken a lot of work to clean them. So, all right. I think if we have any questions, we can answer those. But otherwise, thank you for joining today. We're going to keep doing this. You're on the email list, so we'll let you know when we're doing the next ones. If you want to participate the next time, we're thinking of doing a new format going forward. We'll film a little bit, and then we'll come back, show part of the film when you join, and do more interaction. So take a vote. Let me know by email how you would feel about that, because then you'd be able to show your screen. You'd be in the field and showing plants that you're finding by the time, or pictures. So that's another way we can do this. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Carol and Mom. Mike Dwyer doing this. There he is. Yep. You can't see his great hat he has on.